Ladies and gentlemen, you fellas, 2 games on a Sunday after the massive 10 games on a Saturday. We're having a good time as we're in the middle of it right now, the preseason with week 2. Let's cover these 2 games today. Welcome back to the #1 fantasy football and betting podcast. We got the Manscaped on, we got the Fresh Cut. Who's coming? Who's coming to their channels? Who's coming to their shows with the freshest of cuts, the sharpest of big old eyebrow caterpillar guys on here? I don't know if anybody else is, so you're welcome. But in all seriousness, we got 2 games today. Let's break them down, going position by position. As always, anything updated as I'm recording this on Saturday beforehand, so news is going to come out. We'll update it in the tiers on Patreon. We have about 10 pages of notes for these 2 games over there as well for you to be prepared, and those will be updated if players are ruled out or anything changes for their expected and projected usage. The first player we have to talk about, because these rookies are exciting and they're getting a good amount of playing time and we continue to see them do good things, is going to be Trey Lance. When there's only 4 teams playing and one of them has Trey Lance, the number 3 overall pick, a man who in week 1 played 29 snaps, and honestly, he didn't play well. He played 5 of 14. He should have had 2 interceptions. Now, he did hit that big 80-yard touchdown, but good, he made the throw. As a 3rd overall pick, you should probably make the throw in an open receiver that your offensive coordinator, Kyle Shanahan, schemed open beautifully. He did not end up rushing, which, again, there's either they don't want to see him rush in the preseason because he's the 3rd overall pick, and why take that risk, or also they just want to work some things in. Here, we just want to focus on your pocket awareness, your pocket pressure, and he did not look great in it, although the pocket was crashing around him. So Trey Lance is somebody that I enjoy. I think he's going to be a solid quarterback option, but it's funny to see, just because he started, which we were expecting a preseason game, or came in, he didn't actually start, but just because he actually came into the game, it ends up skyrocketing his ADP from wide receiver or quarterback 14 to now quarterback 10. He didn't even do anything. He threw an 80-yard touchdown, yes, to a wide open receiver. I mean, any first-round pick should be able to do that at the quarterback position. So Trey Lance is going to be somebody that stands out. I mean, last week, he ended up having the 128 yards. You take away that touchdown, though, and he's looking there for less than 2 fantasy points last week if you take away the 80-yard touchdown. They're expecting Jimmy G to play more than 8 snaps this week. I think, if anything, that doesn't really do much to Trey Lance because they cut Josh Rosen. Josh Rosen played 33 snaps last week, so I think Jimmy G takes some of those. I think Trey Lance takes some of those and plays over 30 snaps this week, and then I think Nate Sudfeld for San Fran gets a little playing time. Next up for me, we go to Cleveland, where we did not see Baker play last week. There's a chance he plays limited this week, and then after that, you saw Case Keenum come in, and the main one I want to talk about is Kyle Lauletta. Kyle Lauletta was the quarterback 3 there. He played 46 snaps. Now, if Baker does play, and Baker's expected to maybe play 15 to 20 snaps, I don't really want Kyle Lauletta this high, because then 3 quarterbacks are playing when some other spots we can attack are better. But he ended up having 27 attempts. He just played well. 19 of 27, 212 yards and 2 touchdowns, averaged 7.9 yards per attempt. So he needs the volume, though. It's not like he had any rushing yards. He needs those 46 snaps. If he cuts down to this week 35 snaps, or really just 30 or less snaps, it's not going to look as good because he's not going to be as efficient. I mean, the NFL average is like 7.1 yards per attempt. This Kyle Lauletta, 3rd string on the Cleveland Browns, is not going to massively outproduce that with a 7.9 yard per attempt preseason. So he's in play, but ease expectations if Baker plays, depending on how much he then plays. Same exact thing for Case Keenum, the veteran on Cleveland. He only played 26 snaps last week. That would drop if Baker plays. The next guy I'll talk about is Chase Daniel, who has a little bit more of a secure spot. Justin Herbert did not play week 1. We're not expecting him to play tomorrow, if at all that much. We did not see KJ Costello play in week 1. It was mainly just Easton Stick, the player that they ended up drafting recently last year, and then Chase Daniel. And Daniel played 38 snaps. You saw the majority of the snaps. He had 24 attempts. Played bad, to be honest. 4.3 yards per attempt, 104 yards. It's really just Trey Lance. Like, everything else in the slate looks kind of gross. I will point out, though, that Tommy Stevens is on this slate, though. And if you don't know who Tommy Stevens is, he was at Penn State. He transferred to follow his former offensive coordinator in college, Joe Moorhead, to Mississippi State. He was signed on August 4th, so he just couldn't get involved in time. But he's on the Giants, and the Giants are not expected to run Daniel Jones that much, if at all. They cut Clayton Thornton. So what's left on the Giants is Mike Glennon, who's at least in play for this slate, and Brian Lewark, who was just signed this week. So right now, Tommy Stevens, if Daniel Jones doesn't play, is looking to be the quarterback 2 on this team. And Tommy Stevens has massive rushing upside. He has a decent arm, but massive rushing upside. He was used as like a wildcat guy when he was at Penn State. So if you see news that they're not playing Daniel Jones and 2 quarterbacks are going to take the majority of the snaps for the Giants on this slate, I would be looking at this slate as Trey Lance and Tommy Stevens, and not a lot of people are probably even going to know who Tommy Stevens is or what he does, so he could be a really nice sleeper sneaky play for you. I'm going to be hammering his overs on the prop market if we get any. So now we'll slide on into the running back position. If you're enjoying this, please do take a second of your time and hit the like button. Right now I have 8 running backs listed. We'll talk about 4 of them here. The rest you can see in the tiers over on Patreon. The first one we can talk about, and it's 2 guys from Cleveland. Demetric Felton. He did not have a single carry last week. Demetric Felton was a wide receiver running back hybrid when he was in college. He was kind of like Antonio Gibson, I believe, at UCLA. So Felton last week for the Cleveland Browns didn't play running back. I mean, he lined up as a running back, but didn't take any carries. Instead, he ran 20 routes, a lot of them of which were out of the backfield on 26 snaps. So those are high efficiency routes in terms of if you're targeted, I mean, it's like a 2-yard pass, they're probably going to complete it. So he ended up catching 4 balls for 44 yards on 6 targets. And I don't think this usage is going to change all that much because I'm not expecting Kareem Hunt or Nick Chubb to play this week. What's left in the backfield is 2 fullbacks, John Kelly and Dearness Johnson. So Demetric Felton is in play, and he's firmly in play. The other guy that I like more, I mean, John Kelly and Johnson are in play. They all had involvements in the passing game. I think Kelly ended up catching 4 balls in his own right, but I'm going to go with Dearness Johnson. Dearness Johnson, who made the team in 2019 because of a great preseason, had a solid preseason usage, at least in week 1. He had 5 carries, 14 yards, not great, but he ended up starting the game and playing 24 snaps. The other thing was he did run 17 routes. So as Felton is running 20 routes, well, Johnson's running 17, but also seeing carries. He turned those 17 routes into 2 catches for 28 yards on 3 targets. So those are 2 running backs that are in play because I think their usage, because of what they do with the route run, is pretty impressive. Next up, we go right back to another Trey in San Francisco. A rookie as well, Trey Lance, Trey Sermon out there. Is Trey Sermon, who played 20 snaps in week 1. You didn't see Raheem Mostert. He's kind of on ice for the preseason. He might play this time. Not really expecting him to play all that much. You didn't see Jeff Wilson. He's not expected to play. And right now, Elijah Mitchell is banged up in this backfield. So you already saw 20 snaps, right? You already saw 20 snaps in week 1 for Trey Sermon. If Elijah Mitchell, the other rookie in the 6th round, doesn't play this week, he did not play in week 1, you're probably going to see another secure 20, maybe a little bit more snaps. He had 9 carries. They wanted to feed him the ball. Fumbled the ball. 9 carries, 7 routes run. So I don't think you're going to get massive usage here, but you probably see around 8 to 10 touches. And on a 2-game slate in the preseason for a talent like Trey Sermon, that is very good. The other guy out of this backfield is JaMychal Hasty, who led the team with 10 attempts last week. He saw 23 snaps and he ran 10 routes. So JaMychal Hasty is going to face worse competition, but he's also a worse player in the second half. He's a smaller player than Trey Sermon, so less of a chance at least of these red zone or goal line touches. They might bring in a fullback or a Wayne Gallman, so those are some guys that are in play. There's only 3 running backs last week that were active for the 49ers. Just track that. I would take Trey Sermon, I would then take JaMychal Hasty, and then Wayne Gallman in that order. And then we can go to the Chargers backfield, where it's Joshua Kelly and Larry Roundtree last week making up the majority of the touches. Justin Jackson did see some touches, so did Darius Bradwell, but you saw Joshua Kelly lead the running backs with 28 snaps. Him and Larry Roundtree each saw 8 attempts. Roundtree was way better. 8 attempts for 19 yards for Joshua Kelly, 8 attempts for 63 yards, a long run of 25 for the rookie Larry Roundtree. But the big difference was Roundtree only ran 5 routes. Only ran 5 routes, not good usage on PPR formats. We want to see more routes. He had 0 targets. Whereas Joshua Kelly ran 19 routes. He had 3 targets for -3 receiving yards, right? So that's not great overall. Both of these running backs are in play in the backfield. I would say flip your coin at which one you really want to play. Joshua Kelly, I think Joshua Kelly is the one right now, at least for me, that stands out more. And now as we get into the wide receivers, let me tell you about the sponsor of the program today, and that is going to be SuperDraft. So here are some of the contests for SuperDraft. And SuperDraft is a DFS platform, right? Daily fantasy sports. And SuperDraft is nice because it's just a multiplier format. There's no salary cap, so you can play whoever you want at any time in the year, not just the preseason. They have a bunch of sports, and they have contests for the NFL preseason. And here's the big reason why I'm recommending them to you. Outside of it being a fun way to diversify your monies, your revenues, a couple of things are important here about SuperDraft. Their contests don't fill. You might be hearing about it for the first time. They've been sponsors on the show for 2 years now. So some of you already know about them, but their contests do not fill. Their contests, especially the obscure ones like the NFL preseason, where people in general aren't as excited compared to the NBA or the NFL regular season, or really any other sports regular season, it's going to not fill. So if this contest right here that has 114 people with $4,000 in prizes, right, only one person is currently in it as I'm saying this, if only 50% of this contest fills, say 57 out of 114, the website has to put the remaining money and entries in there, and those lineups all take zeros. So if you just enter, there's a real chance that if you just enter a lineup into one of these contests, right, you deposit, you enter a lineup, you will end up beating 30 to 50% of the field. If it's only 70% fill, you enter a lineup, you beat 30% of the field. There is no way in DFS anywhere else that is going to be that easy to jump a large majority of the field and that easy to actually place and or finish top 10 or win the contest than on SuperDraft. This is not going to last long because the NFL regular season, they're going to have bigger contests, they're going to hype them up, and people are going to play on them. So go in and get into SuperDraft, and you can use the code SAL, S-A-L, well. On your first deposit, they will give you an extra $25 to play with. I'm telling you right now, this will not last the whole preseason, so take advantage of it while you can and get the free, F-R-E-E, free $25 Rooskies. Let's get in now to the wide receiver position, and we can start off with Jamarcus Bradley in Cleveland, who led the team at the wide receiver position in snaps with a massive 46 snaps in week 1. Now, Anthony Schwartz was out last week. He's returning to practice, the rookie, so these snaps I'm expecting to come down, but still probably hover around 30 snaps. He had a team-high 28 routes run. He had 2 catches, 38 yards. We like Jamarcus Bradley. And maybe somebody I like even more than him is Juwan Jennings. Juwan Jennings right now out there for the San Francisco 49ers was massively involved. I mean, they're kind of using him all around the field. He had 2 rushing attempts for 23 yards. They used him in the slot. They used him out wide. He ran 23 routes on 38 snaps, had a catch for 26 yards, overall totaled 49 yards on 3 touches or 3 opportunities. I think he stands out the most. And overall right now, I've got about 14 receivers that should make the tiers, 14, 15, so you can check those out on Patreon. We'll talk about a couple more. David Sills, he ended up playing 32 snaps, had a team high for the Giants last week, 21 routes run, and he saw 5 targets. He was getting separation. 2 of those targets were deep targets. According to Pro Football Focus, 20-plus yards down the field, ended up seeing 3 catches for 49 yards. He would be my favorite Giant. Some other Giants are definitely in play, though. Damian Willis, Alec Bachman, these are guys who ran around 15, 10-plus routes last week. Willis actually ended up finding the end zone wearing number 87, Sterling Shepard's old jersey number. The Chargers have some interesting guys. I mean, KJ Hill has been having a solid camp, so he ended up seeing 30 snaps and 20 routes run. Now, they're short intermediate routes for the former 7th-round pick last year out of Ohio State. There's nice route running, but it's not as downfield upside. The downfield upside goes to the man who's right now apparently leading the charge for the wide receiver 3 job, and that's Josh Palmer, the rookie 3rd-rounder this year for the Chargers. The problem is he ended up seeing 6 targets last week, 6 catches for 36 yards. That stat line is going to look great. It's probably going to inflate his ownership, but he only ran 10 routes. He's too important to this team to run 20 routes. So he saw a 60% target rate. The NFL average is like 18%. That's not going to sustain. If he runs 10 routes again this week, expect 2 to 3 targets, expect 1 to 2 receptions. So I think there's going to be over ownership on Josh Palmer. I love the talent. I love getting him as one of my last round picks in my fantasy football draft, but I will say that is a little bit concerning in terms of his ownership. Similar things can be said if you go over to Cleveland in terms of a guy who's fighting for a wide receiver 3/4 job, and that's the monster out there who apparently looks fantastic in camp, and he looked great last week, Donovan Peoples-Jones. Donovan Peoples-Jones saw 5 targets last week, 3 catches, 26 yards. But he only ran 11 routes. Again, if he only runs 11 routes again because he's too important to the team, he's probably going to see 2 or 3 targets. He's probably going to at best have 1 to 2 receptions and score you 3 or 4 fantasy points. Could he score a touchdown? Sure. But odds are his 11 routes don't turn into 10 targets again. These guys are going to be in play because it's a 2-game preseason slate and they have superior talent. So their 10 routes run are definitely important, but it's a big difference from their 10 routes run and guys that we were mentioning like Jamarcus Bradley running 28 routes. It's just way more opportunity. So those are some of the players that we can talk about. There's like another 7 or 8 that I think are at least in play, and you can see those over on Patreon. Let's close it out now with the tight ends, and there's a couple of tight ends, not a lot, a couple of tight ends we can talk about. The first one is the XFL MVP. You go back to the Chargers, 24 snaps last week and 18 routes run for Donald Parham. He ended up seeing 2 targets, 2 catches for 31 yards. He has great yards after the catch ability. He's a monster. He moves very agile out there. I think he's a great option for you because this slate lacks a lot of athletes at the tight end position. Next up, we'll go to Jordan Franks, who was highly involved last week for the Cleveland Browns. You ended up seeing 39 snaps out of Jordan Franks and 23 routes run, most of which came in the second half. For 4 targets, he caught 2 balls for 12 yards. I think those guys, at least on this slate, saw the most opportunity last week. Some of the guys who will be in play is second-year player for the Browns, Harrison Bryant, who played 17 snaps, ran 11 routes. He's actually probably the best overall tight end athlete, in my opinion, on this slate. Connor Davis played 30 snaps, only ran 16 routes, though not going to be as nice of a play, in my opinion. He's also on Cleveland, so Cleveland's got a lot of guys in terms of tight ends that are in play, but we talked about the main ones. Jordan Matthews, the former wide receiver, converted into tight end, only ran 10 routes. Josh Perkins is going to be somebody that a lot of people own, and I'm telling you, you should probably stay away from it because of that. And by a lot of people, I just mean more than average. Josh Perkins last week caught 3 balls for 24 yards on 4 targets. That's fantastic, but he only ran 5 routes. He ran 5 routes and saw 4 targets, an 80% target share. If he runs 5 routes again, odds are he sees 0 to 1 targets. Now, he's a good player, Josh Perkins, the former Philadelphia Eagle. He got involved when they had a lot of injuries in the past, but his 9 snaps in week 1 are not encouraging. And then you factor in the chance that you might actually see more of Ross Dwelley this week. You might see Michael Pruitt this week, who did not play in week 1. I'm not playing Joshua Perkins with any sort of volume. So that's where we're at right now in terms of this 2-game slate. Again, I'm recording this literally on Saturday morning because it's the weekend. I want to make sure this video gets out there in time, but I also don't want to be recording at 5 o'clock p.m. on a Saturday. I want to enjoy myself, take a little bit of a break away from the preseason while we're still betting on it, but not in the middle of the day when I'm trying to spend my dollar rooskies on the brewskis. So thank you for tuning in today. Support the sponsor of the program. It does help. It helps me talk about the preseason nonstop, which is amazing, right? It allows me to not have to go do a part-time job. SuperDraft, use that code SAL upon your first deposit. They'll give you $25. Those contests are not going to fill. And sign up for Patreon. Join the community. Not only do we have all the tools, all the analysis, all the information you'll need to smash the preseason and a lot of other sports, but we have a Discord. It's a nice community in there. I don't have a lot of friends that do this, really none at all. Some play fantasy football, but most of my friends, they don't do player props. They don't play DFS. Some of them do betting in general, but not a lot. So it's nice to have a community of 300, 400, 500 people, depending on the time of the year, where everybody in there is talking like-minded, giving each other tips, and they're showing their wins. It's celebratory. It's a fun time. So get up in there on Patreon down below. Thank you for tuning in. Please do like and subscribe before you go, and I'll see you in the next one.